Explain the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Mr. Vice President, I'm going off script again, I know, but I just want to personally thank you. We've been through some stuff. We've gone through some of the most complex military operations this country's ever conducted, and your steady hand and your leadership during those was a great source of strength for me. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your character. Thank you for your selfless service. Thank you for commitment. Thank you for being a mentor to me, Mr. Vice President.
It's called the swamp. And you know what happened? And you know what I did? A big favor. I caught the swamp. I caught them all. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done that but me. I caught all of this corruption that was going on, and nobody else could have done it. Did I get that one right? Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
This is a president of the United States who is a danger to the Republic.
America first.
He knows he's an illegitimate president.
The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans.
The great Trump recovery.
America will never be a socialist country. I will fight for you with every breath in my body.
Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, Russian, Russia, Russian, 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 the Russians.
Russia.
And I will never, ever let you down.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. What they're doing is using COVID to steal an election. Together, we will make America strong again. You know what it's about? Fraud, fake ballots. We will make America wealthy again. They are trying to steal the election.
Now, under the leadership of President Trump, we are fully realizing President Kennedy's prescient view of Special Operations Forces.
We will make America proud again. And watch, please, those mail-in ballots. We will make America safe again. And in millions and millions of ballots. Their vote is under what they thought they needed. They're dumping more ballots in there, okay? And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you. God bless you. If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Devolution Power Hour, the Thanksgiving Eve edition. Actually, I heard today, like literally an hour ago, somebody enlightened me that the official term for today is Blackout Wednesday. Have you ever heard of that?
No, and I refuse to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I do too. But apparently, it's like a thing where you can even look on Google and it comes up, or whatever search engine you use, and it's a thing. Blackout Wednesday. You just go get blackout drunk on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Oh,
And
I
that
didn't.
sounds
Well,
terrible.
I mean, we never called it that, but certainly that's definitely a thing where I grew up.
Well,
Maybe it's an Irish holiday.
might be alcoholics holiday. I don't know, but
Right. It's where you get together with the local at the local bars and see people from high school that there's a reason you haven't kept in contact over the last 15 years, but you pretend you're definitely going to see them the next time you see them at this bar
the
in a
next
year.
Wednesday
Yeah.
before Thanksgiving.
Right.
Oh yeah, but nope, we're here. I don't even have any alcohol in my house right now, so can't participate in Blackout Wednesday. But we're going to participate in a Wednesday Power Hour. Lots of good things to discuss tonight. Some interesting things, I think. Yeah, and then that's it. I've got nothing else to say about the show. Anything you want to preview?
No, I mean it's some interesting stuff. It's been a relatively quiet week, I suppose. Although it's a contradiction for me to say in terms of actual events, because we never know what's real and what's not. But in terms of the stories we're being told, there's a lot of threats of escalation, but then there's simultaneous de-escalation comms everywhere. So
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
well, I guess what I can already say, or what I can say about tonight's show, to give you guys an idea, we're going to talk about Kellogg being named to Trump's team and where he's being named at. That's pretty darn interesting. And that ties into some other stuff going on with Trump's transition. And also, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this dig having to do with nukes and the nuclear scare event situation going on over in Russia, Ukraine. I think that'll be a really good discussion, especially with your background in that. The Jack Smith case came to a close and what that might mean and what we're looking for here moving forward. And then also, yeah, I think that might be it. Oh, the Gaza ceasefire. We might get into that.
We got
Tariffs.
some tariff stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, plenty to talk about. Before we do any of that, two things. First of all, hit the thumbs up. Do me a favor. Second of all, got to ask for prayers for our accountant. If you have been to any of our guards, you've probably met her. Her name is Kimberly. I'm just going to say she was hit by a car in a parking lot, and she is in the ICU right now, and she needs prayers. So we'd appreciate it if you guys would do so.
We did hear from her, though.
Yes.
So I just want people to be aware that she's not in a coma.
Yeah. So I spoke with her on the phone like right before the
Yeah.
show, but she's in the ICU monitoring her because of some scary stuff going on still. So yeah, just keep her in the prayers. We'd appreciate that. And yeah, so we'll get to our two sponsors quick, and then we'll get right into the Kellogg stuff probably. But first up, we got CB Distillery. And they got a Black Friday sale. CB Distillery is having a massive Black Friday sale. Save up to 60% off their entire site with promo code RUMBLE. If holiday chaos has you stressed out and sleepless, bring back the merry and bright with CBD from CB Distillery. They have natural solutions for pretty much everything: stress, sleep, post-workout pain, even mood and focus. And it's all made with the highest quality clean ingredients. It's the perfect gift for those on your wish list that have everything. Stuff their stockings with better sleep and treat your gym buddies to less pain after exercise and grab a little holiday calm for yourself. I love CBD, especially for the sleep. It works. Right now, you can save 60% during the Black Friday sale. CB Distillery. Go to cbdistillery.com, promo code RUMBLE for up to 60% off. That is a heck of a deal. Do you Black Friday shop, by the way?
No, absolutely not. It's always been a thing when I'm around the family. The we call it the aunt table, also known as the cacklers. They're all cackling together. It's contagious cackling. But on Thanksgiving, they all come up with their plan to go out on Friday and Black Friday shop. I don't know if they're still going to do that this year, but that sounds like hell on earth to me.
Yeah, never been a thing of mine either. I don't think I've ever gone shopping in my life on a Black Friday, So
I'm just gonna say, just in general.
just I've never shopped before.
Yeah.
I do online shopping, but no, I do go out shopping now and then. Just
I
never
actually
on-
get lost in stores, like as if I'm 7. For some reason, if I'm in like a department store, Mrs. Bright can attest to this, I will lose all sense of direction, spatial awareness, and she thinks it's a psyop to get out of shopping, which it just doubles as that. But I completely lose track of what is going on, and I'm convinced that it's on purpose.
You like run around the store then, like Mrs. Bright, help.
I hide under the clothing racks and just cling and find whichever mom comes by to take me along with her.
You're embarrassing. Okay, final sponsor of tonight's show, our good friends at EasyRx. Tonight's show is brought to you by our partners at EasyRx. With government failures and devastation running rampant, it's never been a better time to stockpile popular medications like amoxicillin, azithromycin, ivermectin, fenbendazole, hydroxychloroquine, and other viral care medications, and so much more. And right now, EasyRx is having their best sale of the year. For a limited time, Badlanders will receive 25% off purchases over $100 using promo code Black Friday. Rest assured that you and your loved ones are ready for anything with EasyRx. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/EasyRx and use promo code Black Friday for 25% off purchases over $100. Stock up on those antibiotics, everybody. All right. Well, let's start the show with, actually, before we get to the Kellogg stuff, with the transition news, because Saturday and even Wednesday, we've been talking about this Trump transition a little bit, and Trump was refusing to sign the memorandum of understanding with the GSA. We went really in depth on this on Saturday's Power Hour, so I would encourage you to watch that if you're curious about this particular topic, because it was pretty interesting as to why. And the way that the left was framing this, they were like, I mean, it's technically not illegal for him to do this, and technically he's still president. Everything's going to move forward as whatever, but it's really, he's breaking the norms by not signing this agreement and these ethics pledges that he's supposed to. Like, there's a big thing about ethics pledges. Well, it came out today or yesterday. I don't remember what day it is. November 26th. Is that today?
That's yesterday.
That was yesterday. Okay, so yesterday, the Trump transition team signs a modified agreement. And I think it's pretty interesting how they did this. And we're gonna show you exactly what, and then we'll discuss a little bit. And this is from Sundance. You know what? I might actually show the Zero Hedge summary. President Trump transition team has signed a memorandum of understanding to start the process of transferring control of the federal government. The landing teams from each of the cabinets will now begin to engage with their existing counterparts. There were many articles written about the delays in signing the agreement. However, President Trump waited until he has his cabinet fully assembled before signing the first part that permits the landing teams to engage. I think that's interesting, because I'd be curious to know how he did it in the past. Like in 2016, did he have his full cabinet before he started before he signed the memo of understanding? Because I know his Secretary of Defense pick wasn't until like mid to late December, I want to say. So I'm curious if that was a change, but this is the big change right here. This is from the actual pledge, or the MOU. The transition will not use government buildings or technology provided by the GSA, the General Services Administrator, and will operate as a self-sufficient organization. This organizational autonomy means a streamlined process that guarantees the Trump administration is ready on day one. And then the transition already has existing security and information protections built in, which means we will not require additional government and bureaucratic oversight. This is the Trump team and the Trump administration giving a big old middle finger to the current existing government for what they did in 2016 by spying on them.
I mean, it reads like that. I mean, it's bicameral. On the one hand, it's definitely a fuck you of you guys spied on us last time. You totally spied on my campaign, and we're not going to let you do that in the waning days of your administration. So, I guess if you're looking for any kind of threat by the outgoing establishment, we're in a sort of, we're in irregular warfare, which Trump has obviously been talking about for years, and we've been talking about. So what is irregular warfare built on? It's information. The more information your enemy has about what you're going to do, the more potential interference they can cause. That's one side of it. The other side of it is the second part of what you read there it of course makes us think of devolution. But even if you're kind of a normie and you're not thinking about devolution and continuity of government operations, it reads to normies like the Trump transition team is saying, we don't need anything from the current government. It's consistent with the framing and the story that they've been telling about their intentions for Trump 2.0. For everything from the Department of Government Efficiency we've been talking about, this Trump transition is not about business as usual. It's about, no, we know how you guys do things, and we are not planning to do things that way. So we read it with devolution goggles on, and I think that that's accurate. But I also think if you're a normie, you could read this as them saying, like, yeah, we don't need access to the current governmental structures because we don't really plan on following those. We're coming in with a completely fresh, radical agenda in a good way, radical change agenda.
Yeah. Well, what I also think is interesting about this is the fact that he didn't sign it right away. There were numerous articles written on this topic, which in the past I don't think has ever been a thing. Like, so in the past, it's like, okay, it's just transition. Do they even write a story on this at all? Probably not.
Right.
But because he hadn't signed it yet, they made such a big deal of it. Like, why is Trump not signing these things? They were drawing attention to this specific memorandum of understanding. Like, shit, I cannot talk today. And because of that, once he did sign it, that itself became a story. And so everybody who was following the story of him not having signed it yet now tune in to see, okay, he signed it. What was the delay? And the delay was, we don't trust your government. You guys fucked us over in 2016. You spied on our campaign, all these other issues. And we're not going to use any of your technology. We don't need your funds. We're not going to use your office space because we don't trust you. And I think that's an interesting almost subplot to this whole thing is the attention it drew to the reason that they didn't sign it.
Yeah, and to your point, I just pulled up that this is one of many. This was 3 days ago on the 24th. And it was just, the media establishment, to your point, it feels like they thought we were gearing up for a long, drawn-out standoff. You can sometimes see when you've been observing the media machine for as long as we have, you can see when they're trying to sort of spin up new storylines. And the transition standoff was definitely a storyline that they thought, like, if you read that whole Politico piece and many more like it over the last few days, they were saying, like, this is where it could go. This is why the current outgoing Biden administration is well within their rights to be withholding, barring the transition team from access to certain information. Yeah. So then it feels like a rug pull. It's like that classic Trump rug pull where he's like, oh, gotcha, we signed it. We just made a couple changes here. So then it also deprives them of that ammunition where they spend all this sort of media capital gearing up for the next big fight. And then boom, whoop, it's done. It's not even a story now, 2 days later.
Yeah, and for a little bit, it was mirroring what happened in 2016. But I mean, for different reasons, but 2020. Right. In 2020, the Trump transition, there were multiple articles about them not sharing classified information with the Biden counterparts. And that was a story. So it was at the DOD specifically. It was Kash Patel as the chief of staff to acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller, who's the one in charge of the transition, and he wasn't sharing stuff. And that was notable. But here, like, they almost had their built-in excuse, like you said, not to have to share stuff.
Yeah.
But now they signed it, and the reason they didn't sign it was because they don't trust the government, and the government in the past has caused issues, and they drew attention to it. I think it's beautiful. And so the funding too, I wonder if I know as of now they're not gonna, I think that's in the article. I'm curious if they're gonna actually use the funding part of it, because that's a big part of what the GSA does is provide funding for all this stuff. But it says here, while suggested the Tuesday announcement, while suggested the Trump transition will not sign a separate agreement with the GSA, which would have allowed them to receive federal funding, cybersecurity support, and government office space, pledging instead to fund the transition with private dollars, run it out of private facilities, and deploy their own existing security and information protections for sensitive data. I wonder if they're going to be reimbursed for that. Like Chris floated on Saturday, like, what if they do it from Mar-a-Lago? What if they just stay down there? Do they even need to be in Washington, D.C. to be the president?
Well, man, that's an interesting thought. I mean, we obviously because of devolution and beyond, we think that that was the Winter White House. Much more than that. That was the act. I guess Trump had so many acting DOD and executive branch employees and cabinet members in the waning days of his first administration that he essentially had an acting White House down in Mar-a-Lago. But again, a big theme of the branding of the next administration is stripping down of government. We've been talking about this on all the shows, and Doge is the easiest way to sort of explain that. But it would be kind of interesting, besides devolution framing, it'd be interesting on like a mass psychological American perspective to see how Americans would respond to the president not being as tied in narratively to the White House. Like, he's not doing all the pressers on the White House lawn. He's not constantly walking away from a helicopter and grabbing like all the typical we're talking to the guy in charge right now backdrops.
Yeah.
If he's only there some of the time, he's doing press conferences in Mar-a-Lago. To me, it would actually be beneficial on a psychological basis because it starts to decentralize that idea of the presidency and start to say like, hey, the presidency isn't tied into the guy in this building. It's not tied. This isn't where the country happens right here. It's like, this is just a symbol. And then one more point on the transition team that just makes me smile is the fact that the media was clearly gearing up for a bigger story than they got. And the fact that then they were rug pulled immediately, it makes me be thankful for the time we had with our boy Blue and to say that he's still in there rustling jimmies. It's just funny to think about like, well, who had to sign that? That had to be signed by both parties. And it's got some interesting concessions in there. So it's kind of funny that, I don't know, maybe some people in the current quote-unquote Biden administration are not marching along to the beat that media people think they're going to. They're like, oh, we're going to have this long standoff heading to inauguration. And then the Biden transition team is like, oh, yeah, we'll agree to this.
Well, I think they have to sign it with the head of the GSA. Like, that's the person in charge of overseeing the transition and all these things. But one more interesting part from this article is the reason that this is what the left and the Biden administration is saying is concerning to them. The lack of federal cybersecurity support could also make the Trump transition a softer target for foreign hackers who already successfully penetrated the campaign earlier this year. That's something that in 2020 was maybe the single most important worry of the Biden transition team, that they would be hacked. And all this information, including intelligence info, personal info about job applicants, would be threatened. I think that's notable because who would be doing that cybersecurity? It would be CISA. Like, that's the cybersecurity. And, coming full circle from, I guess it wouldn't be full circle. We've come a long way from where at least I personally thought CISA was on the game board in 2021 to where I am now, where I think they're totally deep state. I used to think they were like white hats and they monitored the elections, whatever. Total deep state entity, guys, 100%. And so Trump cut them out of the process. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about that as well later on when we get to the nuke stuff, about the DHS and CISA, because that's CISA's its own agency, but it's basically part of the DHS. Them getting cut out of stuff is it's notable. For a lot of it's a deep state agency, so I think that's interesting and another thing to monitor. I wonder if we're going to have any hacks or any attempted hacks, or if they do, the Trump transition team is going to be the ones that would be the ones to come out and say it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if there's a hack, it's going to be up to the Trump team to say they were hacked and by who.
Yeah. And we'll talk about, obviously, the scare event stuff in deeper detail later, but I don't know if we would touch on this necessarily. One thing that I've been thinking about lately is China, just in terms of it being oddly quiet on the China front, right? Like a lot of the stories that we'll talk about in greater detail in that topic about Russia, about Ukraine, about scare events that we've been talking about for literally 3 years or more, seem to be right in line on a broad strokes level. Nobody who's been paying attention to this stuff is all that surprised to see the way the story is developing. Yeah. But I will say, if there's anything, I would be a little surprised if it doesn't happen before inauguration or early, I guess, into Trump's next term would be some major narrative regarding China and
Like
hacking.
Taiwan, you're thinking?
Well,
Or-
Taiwan was originally certainly what I was thinking, and I'll admit, I mean, this was 2 years ago. I thought that if Taiwan was going to go hot in any way or any story like that, it was going to be in that August to October window. Not necessarily this year, but maybe last year. Hey, maybe that'll be a next year thing. Who knows? Because that just all the story points, all the storylines kind of point to that. It's when there's the most activity there. It's when typhoon season is the lowest. So like you get all this buildup. And I've kind of been looking for that. Maybe that'll be something that happens during Trump's administration. Like we might get the Russia stuff leading up to it, and maybe we get the China stuff later on.
Yeah.
But when you mention hacking, we were talking on Power Hour quite a bit in the lead up to the 2024 election that besides the Russia storylines, they were really trying to seed in the China hack. Like they were trying to associate China with hacking. And we never really saw that come to a head in a major narrative. So I guess it's still on the bingo card.
Yeah. And we never really got resolution from the Iran hack story.
No. Which again makes me wonder, we talked about the lack of an October surprise. And one of the theories that I'd floated based on just nothing, just based on a gut, based on there not being based on things not happening, was if Kamala Harris and her campaign did have anything to do with the hack of Trump's campaign and that they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, one of the theories I'd floated was that a disarmament strategy? Was Trump team basically saying, hey, we know we have an October surprise that could end this campaign in a way that would be biblical, and the reason we didn't see that come out is because we got the Kamala campaign and all of them sort of back off heading into the election.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That is weird that we never got the October surprise.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of like stuff that could have been worthy of October surprise, narratives. I think we'll see a lot of that stuff later on.
Yeah.
They may not have needed it, either side. And maybe one side was screwed or couldn't even do it, or they had nothing left to surprise with. But the Trump side, I think, I can't wait for him to get in there. It's going to be so awesome. But let's continue on with some of this transition discussion because there's more names getting thrown around and some pretty interesting ones. We got General Kellogg in the mix. Donald Trump, this was today. I'm very pleased to nominate General Keith Kellogg to serve as assistant to the president and special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. Like only the most important place to serve as a special envoy to. Keith has led a distinguished military and business career, including serving in highly sensitive national security roles in my first administration. He was with me right from the beginning. Together, we will secure peace through strength and make America safe again. America and the world safe again. And if you guys remember, we did a Power Hour back in August where we were reading through some of Kellogg's J6 testimony. And the part that kind of blew everybody's mind was when we got to him talking about Trump tweets and how they use the Socratic method and everything along those lines. And it was fascinating. You guys were definitely thought it was cooler than I did just because it's a Q thing. But
yeah,
there's more to that. This is something, this is what Trump said a couple times during his first term about Kellogg.
General, come on over here. General Kellogg's been fantastic, done a great job. He's working on a special project now, aren't you? I am, sure. Very special project. Okay.
General Kellogg, he's one of our great generals. He's done a fantastic job for me, and he's doing some very important things for me right now. So, General, thank you very much. Really fantastic job.
So there's that. And then one more thing on Kellogg. And I thought this might have been even the most interesting thing about it, or most interesting thing I've seen today anyway. In his tweet, Kellogg said, I'm honored by Trump's appointment to serve as assistant to the president and special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. It was the privilege of my life working for President Trump, and I look forward to working tirelessly to secure peace through strength while upholding, I didn't even get the rest of it because it's this bottom part that I think is crazy. Anthony Tata responds with, congratulations, General. It was a privilege serving with you in the 82nd Airborne Division and Trump 45. You are the right leader to bring peace to. And then he says, more stuff. But that part right there, he served with Keith Kellogg, General Kellogg, Anthony Tata. For those who don't remember, in part 3 of my series, and we've brought him up multiple times over the past like 3 years on the Power Hours, but on part 3, if you go down, he was the first person that was given a job essentially after Chris Miller, and he was named to the USDP, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, which happens to provide oversight for COOPCOG. Like that's his primary function.
Yeah.
Function A, and function B is the continuity coordinator, and he's the guy who wrote that book, Double Crossfire, which is about, in the most shocking scenario of our time, former Brigadier General Anthony Tata takes you inside a brilliantly conceived, brutally executed plot to overthrow our government from within.
Totally fictional. Definitely a fictional thing there. Do you have the clip queued up of wasn't it Kellogg that Trump was referencing this past year at that outdoor event? Because that one's pretty great.
Yep. Let me get that here.
But the 82nd Airborne thing and the connections between these players, it really just the term that's been popping into my head a lot, and I think it was probably seeded in the Q drops, is silent running. There's some names amidst all the pomp and circumstance and sort of bravado of a lot of these Trump cabinet picks for 2.0, the media drama surrounding them. I'm finding the silence on some of them deafening, and then they're counterbalanced. Any of these dramatic picks are counterbalanced with these Kellogg picks and some others that are signal to people who are in this community. And Normieville, they're just like, who's this guy?
Yeah. Like nobody would care about Kellogg or
Right.
Tata, but yeah, to me it was like Kellogg being picked. It's almost even more signal, I think, than a DNI Ratcliffe being picked.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I never would have said that back when we first started, the Devolution series. But now, like where it's come and stuff I've seen, it's very important. Here's another clip.
This is the clip that really made us think that much more so than we did.
Yeah, this is the reason I dug into his transcripts.
Yeah,
is this clip.
GOP Chairman Jason Simmons, who's been a friend of ours for a long time. Where's Jason? Nice tall character right here. Thank you very much, Jason. And somebody that's been with me from day one, he's a real general. You know, we have the real generals and we have the fake woke generals that did so poorly in Afghanistan, should have all been fired. But this is a real general, Keith Kellogg. Right, Keith? And this is a great group. It's good to see you, Keith. He's been with me from before day one, right? He said, that guy should run. We got to get him to run. I like those guys. They were here before I ran. You know, there's quite a few of them, too. We have the front row, Joes. You know that?
The reason I thought that was so interesting, too, is because that's a different story from what Kellogg told in his J6 committee testimony. Because Kellogg said, like, he's talking to a friend. He retired. He said he wanted to get into politics. And one of his friends suggested, I think it was like Cruz or Rubio or something. And Kellogg is the one who's like, well, I think I'd rather work with Trump. Like, can I go over there? Like, do you have any connections there? And I don't think the friend did, but that's where he ended up going. But that was after Trump had already announced.
Believe that. I definitely 100% believe that, and I definitely don't believe that there was anything before that where somebody asked Trump to run as part of the biggest military intelligence operation ever conceived.
I just thought of, the 82nd Airborne Division thing, isn't that in the Q drop?
I was looking for it. So if anybody in the chat knows, I searched 82nd Airborne, but...
No, search the one, I don't remember the exact words, but it's like Red Line 1, Red Line 2, classified movement of VP something. Oh, wait, go back up. On the left side there, was that it? No, never mind. Sorry.
Sometimes if you search,
I know I've seen this Q drop like a million times.
There's a million with red, of course. That was a stupid class. I just forget how it was exactly.
Something blackout? Wasn't blackout one of them?
Yeah, but then there was like different characters that they would use. Oh, there we go. Red 1, POTUS Twitter removal. Red 2, Central Communications blackout.
It's 10th Mountain Division.
10th Mountain.
Not 82nd.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wonder. Sorry, guys, gotta look at something now.
Yeah, but this, it just makes me think. I mean, that clip that you just played with Trump, it's incredible. There's a bunch of bits of signal there. I mean, first of all, he calls him one of his real generals, not like the TV generals. And man, if that isn't like, besides devolution comms, that's like war of stories. I've been calling them translation layers recently, where you've got your millies, etc. Whatever these guys are in actuality, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're pretending to be deep state swamp creatures and they're actually white hats. Or I think it's entirely conceivable that a lot of these TV generals, as Trump is calling them, are swamp creatures, and they're sort of being forced out there in the public during the Biden era to take a lot of those public slings for the stuff that they were involved in. But Trump is talking about that silent running thing. I mean, one of the refrains and sort of analogs that is threaded throughout the Q drops, one of the strongest comparisons it draws is to the Hunt for Red October, which we'll get to in more literal detail later tonight. But just as a baseline analog, it's this Rig for Red, silent running analogs that were constantly threaded throughout the Q drops. And then you get Trump up there, especially in 2024, just being a lot more overt about his comms. Now, whatever a normie thinks, whatever people think of the Q drops, whatever they think of the devolution operation, whether or not continuity of government was implemented, you've got Donald Trump standing there saying, there's real generals and there's TV generals. This guy knew me before day one. And then his announcement today, he talks about the highly sensitive national security nature of Kellogg's work. And really, it reminded me of the intro to the show. It reminded me of Christopher Miller, like to Normieville, and I guess Normie Militaryville, who paid attention to the public story of Trump 1.0. They would not see Keith Kellogg as a figure worth a lot of gravity, nor would they see a figure like Christopher Miller. And yet, Donald Trump is telling you that these figures are really, really important to him. So if devolution and the Q drops are not indicative of something of a larger silent running plan here, then none of those comms make any sense, nor do the current selections make sense.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. More on Kellogg really quick before we move on. I forgot about this too, even though we brought it up in August. He worked for Oracle, which is another big company.
Wow. I forgot about that.
Yeah. He was their advisor on Homeland Security. I mean, there's so many reasons why that's important. One of the bigger ones, I think, is where Oracle connected to Trump, especially around in his first administration. But then Ezra Cohen-Watnick worked there. Is it Larry Ellison? Is that the guy's name who did the role that he played?
Who may or may not be involved with a covert op to retake Hollywood, or his son is, I think. David Ellison is leading Skydance, who just announced recently that they are taking over Paramount. And I've been saying for a couple of years that if there's one Hollywood studio that you could potentially resuscitate and restore rather than dismantle, which we've talked about with a lot of different institutions, it would be Paramount, because they actually have the largest, they still have the highest favorability reputation among conservatives. So now all of a sudden you get a Larry Ellison vehicle through his son that is buying Paramount. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'd say that's notable. And then last thing here, and I think this is almost a totally made up situation, but because of who's involved, you have Pence was trying to leave the Capitol, or at least Kellogg reportedly told Anthony Ornato, a guy highlighted in my series, former head of Secret Service, you can't do that, Tony. Leave him where he's at. He's got a job to do. I know you guys too well. You'll fly him to Alaska if you have a chance. Don't do it. Kellogg made it clear that Pence would stay even if he needed to remain all night. Again, this was during the J6 stuff. The fact that it was Ornato, Pence, and Kellogg, I feel like this whole thing is just a made-up story for something else. But speaking of January 6th, unless you have anything else you want to say on this topic.
Well, the Kellogg thing, I mean, I guess it's related to our last story, but this won't be about Scare Event. I just wanted to show people this is how the media is currently framing their initial attacks Trump's new Ukraine advisor suggested ceding territory to Russia. So amidst everything that John and I just said about Kellogg and everything you guys know about him, don't miss the forest for the trees. The fact that Kellogg is being appointed to lead negotiations between, well, ostensibly to lead negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And what does Kellogg think about the conflict? First of all, he thinks that any peace plan needs to be reasonable and it needs to involve ceding territory to Russia. He also does not think it should include NATO membership for Ukraine. So he says here, President Biden and other NATO leaders should offer to put off NATO membership for Ukraine for an extended period in exchange for a comprehensive and verifiable peace deal with security guarantees. So, you know, it's like we've been saying for a long time, but very recently on this show, I have a sneaking suspicion that whatever peace deal is signed between Zelensky and Putin is going to look nearly identical to the one that Putin offered in February, March 2022, that we're told, according to the narrative, the UK and Brussels played a huge role in scuttling. So now we've got this silent running real general who's going to come in, and all of his proposals for the Ukraine war ending seem to mirror all of Vladimir Putin's proposals back in 2022. Like, you know, this, if you watch whatever comes of this movie and you think Keith Kellogg is actually negotiating with Putin rather than simply pantomiming a deal that everybody knows is already on the table, like it's there. If you just want to look at it, it's already there.
You totally blew your load on the last story that we're going to get to.
No. We're going to talk about Scare Event, the last story. That's a lot.
Okay.
Your dig is Scare Event related, not Kellogg related.
Yeah, well, it's Russia-Ukraine related.
Right.
But I mean,
that
that fit.
Tease.
That fit. That was a good tease. Okay. Yeah. But, well, it's J6, okay? This is a much better segue than one Bernie Bright did. J6, speaking of J6, Jack Smith has shut down his case. We're not going to go too in-depth on this, but I mean, it's pretty notable. He shut down his case. He filed with Chutkin. He wanted it to be dismissed without prejudice. If you read the thing, the reason he did it is because, like, well, I guess longstanding protocol and the Office of Legal Counsel at the White House says that we're not supposed to have a president with an indictment hanging over his head. Like they've cared about rule of law at all these last 3 years. You know, they threw that completely out the window. But now all of a sudden it's like, well, we better do what, you know, political norms say we should do. So we're going to shut this thing down. But Chutkin did grant it without prejudice. And so technically there's a technicality out there that they could bring this stuff back up again when Trump is no longer president. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it'll be the case because I don't think any of these people will be around or be walking free, the people that have been behind this first set of legal challenges. But yeah, he threw it out. And the second key part to this whole thing is the day after it was announced that he was shutting it down, it was announced that Garland is going to be releasing the Jack Smith report. Okay, this report it's set to come out before January 20th. I would imagine it comes out before J6. Like, I bet we get it in December, mid to late December. And the reason I think that is because if everything they did with Jack Smith stuff was to delegitimize Trump and in the first place not even allow him to be the nominee, now they're going to use whatever, you know, political or narrative capital they have left and try to use it to cause chaos, because that's the mode they're in right now. Yeah. If they can't figure out a way to prevent Trump from being inaugurated, they need to do everything they can to make sure he gets in there on the worst footing possible. And so they will, I anticipate, release this to cause chaos at J6 or whatever kind of chaos. Maybe they try to do some bullshit where they use the Section 3 14th Amendment to not let him be president. I don't know. I don't know if they can even get away with it. Probably not. Yeah. They probably don't have the seats anymore. But that's what it's going to be about, is chaos. And so I'm actually kind of excited for that report to come out, and it'll be our job in, you know, we're the media now, guys. So we got to debunk that shit. I don't think the media will have much, you know, narrative rope to work with, but
right,
it's coming.
Do you want to talk resistance or lack thereof? Because let's do it. That's a good one. Because that really made me think of it. I sent this to John a couple days ago. Yeah, there were a few of these going around. I've got a couple other ones I can pull up, but essentially over the last week and change, there's been this really interesting just kind of collective demeanor developing in the central narrative. And it's one of capitulation, I would say, like resignation. Before the election, I'd written an article called Hibernation Theory. It was just to codify the idea that some of these rats were going to try to hibernate and wait out the next term because they're like, hey, we did it the first time around, we can survive another one. And I think the people who are real deep state swamp creatures know that's not going to happen. But it does seem like the media establishment is trying to follow that model. Actually, I don't know if we've talked about it on Power Hour, because the weeks go by so much, or if you guys talked about it Saturday, but isn't it hilarious, that whole Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough deployment, right? Like, talk about capitulation. A lot of people were saying that looks like a hostage video. They're being attacked. But the tenor of all these resistance going quiet articles, it's kind of funny. They read like mourning. They read like the writers in the establishment are actually in a state of mourning, where they are lamenting the fact that there's not going to be a resistance this time. And I wanted to share one in particular. I think it is this one. Let me see. I'm getting so good at pressing buttons. So we got Washington Post. Why the resistance went quiet after Trump's victory. Something odd has happened. A fascist has risen to power in the world's oldest democracy. Blah, blah, blah. Adolf Hitler comes. None of this rhetoric is new. Today, a verdict has been handed down, yet the language of autocratic doom has dissipated. A faint memory of a different era. So, if this is what the fight against fascism looks like, it's not much of a fight. It sounds more like a dishonorable surrender. Now, they're pulling from the meeting between our boy Blue and Trump, where Biden was cracking jokes. It kind of looked like he was welcoming, I don't know, a conquering, like an old friend back into the fold. They're talking about their own embrace of hyperbole. You know, this reads like the media establishment is saying, guys, they're talking to themselves with these op-eds. They're talking to each other. They're saying, we told our readers this guy was the second coming of Hitler, and now we're having. I saw AP News characterized Mika and Joe's meeting with Trump as, quote, high tea. Like, they were referencing it as being that they're trying to get in good with the new regime. They're pretty much calling them good Nazis. But one more thing from this that I loved. This is the mood of the current liberal establishment, and I've seen this in Normieville. It might be tantalizing to see ourselves as radicals and revolutionaries against the tide of dictatorship, but it's presumptuous and even self-indulgent to make ourselves the center of the story. We are not revolutionaries. America, for all its flaws, is still a democracy, and in democracies, there probably shouldn't be revolutionaries. There are citizens, and that should be enough. So they're pretty much coming to terms with the American people spoke, whatever we think of the election. The mandate after the election is super obvious, even to the media, that Trump has the full mandate. And they're trying to come to terms with it. Like, they're trying to, I think they're trying to pick a lane and pick a story. And they're coming to terms with the concept or the idea that, how are you going to bridge the gap of that cognitive? They know Trump people like us are never going to take them seriously, right? But how do you get your own base back when you told them this guy was Hitler, and now you're going to start treating him more kindly, maybe, in Trump 2.0? They're really in a pickle.
Yeah, well, a couple things on this. So, number one, like, there's a part of that argument where, okay, we called this guy a fascist, but now the fascists won, and we're just going to, like, disappear, and nobody cares. Is it because they're actually doing that? Are they capitulating? Are they trying to hibernate and survive these next 4 years? That's one argument. Maybe that is what they're doing. But on the other hand, it's like, this was way too easy. Yeah. It went way too easy. They didn't expend really any ammo that I think they could have, and not literal ammo, but like, yeah, outside of the few of the stories that they typically do, the sex allegations or sexual assault allegations and weird shit like that, and just calling him a Nazi forever didn't work, didn't steal him an election. And so what else do they have up their sleeve? It's just hard for me to believe that was it. It's just too quiet. It's like the calm before the storm, right? And that's why I think there's almost like some tension in our movement still a little bit. Like, even though we won, we got the narrative win. I mean, it's fake elections, like Chris says. I don't trust our election system at all. We still got to keep fighting, but it still seems like it was too easy. There's got to be another shoe to drop or something. Something's still got to happen. And so that is where I'm like, what is that going to be? And when is it going to be? Because there isn't a whole lot of time. And maybe that's what takes us into this Russia situation.
Right.
Because there is some interesting stuff going on there. And
well, that's what they're trying to do, for sure.
And what could they pull if they draw us into a World War III before Trump gets in there? And again, wartime powers, even if we don't think the Biden administration has real powers, because I don't, they might try to use their narrative powers, and try to get away with some bullshit, which I don't think will work, but that doesn't mean they won't try. And so I think there's something there, but yeah, it was just all too quiet, man. So maybe maybe it's a little of both. Maybe they are capitulating a little bit, but maybe there's something else coming, and that's the pushback.
Yeah, and before we get into that, that's the big topic. Going away from the media angle slightly, I found this was similar. This is from the 25th. New progressive strategy for warring with Trump. They had interviewed a bunch of Senate and congressional staffers for this story. Essentially, I mean, I guess here's the log line. If Trump succeeds, they can take some credit for bringing him to the table. If he doesn't, they can bash him for it. So to add to what I think to your point, the real power players, such that they are in the deep state, meaning I would characterize those people as the clandestine operators. Like, if there are any assets on the ground, CIA, pick your intel agency, pick your deep state apparatus. I think that Politico piece, it's talking about capitulation. It's talking about Elizabeth Warren and all these people who are basically saying, yeah, well, our big plan to resist Trump is to rebrand ourselves as trying to work with him to implement his vision, but his vision's not going to work. And that just doesn't seem like a real strategy. It seems like they've got no plan. So those don't seem like the power players to me. To your point, I think that they don't know what they're doing. The real power players would be trying to spin something up that would actually throw a wrench in Trump 2.0 before it gets started, not like trying to screw with him on policy.
Yeah, that was going to be my counterpoint to you. Is like those people, like an Elizabeth Warren, she's a beneficiary of the deep state and the fraudulent system they have in place, and she just plays ball. Like, she does what she's told when she's told to. But she's not in on any planning meetings. I can't imagine Pocahontas is in on any planning meetings. But if they're going to do something, like thinking realistically, like what are their options? And it's really hard for me to believe. Like, I will be surprised if we get through now all the way to Trump getting inaugurated without some form of actual pushback. Because if things are going down the way we think they're going down, and this election means as much as we've been led to believe it means, and we all think this, like, this was the most important election of anybody's lifetime, and to them it was like they're the cornered animal. A lot of people talk about this, but they're desperate. They're on their last life, essentially. Like, they need to do something to prevent Trump from. They need the chaos, and so what is that chaos going to look like, and how are they going to get it moving? And I don't know. And I do think it's probably going to be that World War III thing, but which we'll get to here in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's some sort of plan going on, the narrative layer that we're seeing from whether it's the Axios and the staffers or the Elizabeth Warrens and the people doing interviews on CNN, they have no idea what is coming. They're not in on any of that. They're gonna.
I totally agree, and that's what's actually encouraging to me is that. I think that whoever the true power players are, such that they are the deep state, it's not these people, to your point. It's not the media. But it's kind of been fun to take victory laps, not just about the election, but I really don't think, to your point, these people know what's going on. And they really, it's almost like they've got the same, for a different reason, they're adopting the same wait and see approach that a lot of us are, where we're almost like, all right, when's the other shoe drop? Like, we're riding high off this narrative election win, and we fully believe there's going to be Trump 2.0. We've been saying that for years, even when we did think the election could get rugged, that there is going to be a Trump 2.0. It is going to lead us toward a golden age. Chris calls it the American Renaissance. We do a Great American Restoration tour because we think it's going to happen. But we still think that there's some resistance here. It seems like the media machine and these political establishment stooges, it's like they're waiting for it too, but they don't know if it's going to happen, or they don't know if it's going to work. Because I think a lot of them did think that the fraud apparatus was going to be actualized and work in November, and they seemed genuinely shell-shocked that it didn't. Again, I don't think the real power players in the deep state are shocked by any of this stuff. But I guess to sort of, you can lead us into the dig on the Russia stuff, but just from a narrative perspective, a pattern that I think leads into this and that I think is highly encouraging. I've been using the word lately, linearity, which is really comes from mathematics, but they use it in writing a lot, which is I consider it a negative term. So if you're a writer and you're putting together, like, let's say a thriller or a mystery, if your plot follows a too lineal of a structure, it's considered very boring, even though it's very easy to follow. It's like, okay, step 1, call to action. Step 2, you meet a mentor. Step 3, there's a crisis. Like, when stories follow that sort of plot progression, it's the type of story you read to children. It helps them understand story structure. The themes are really easy to grasp. But if you're trying to hide anything or say anything bigger with your story, linearity is not what you want. And what I've been seeing leading up to this topic is super obvious, apparent linearity in the public narrative. It's all like, this is what Trump is saying. This is how the current establishment on their way out the door is responding. These are the potential consequences, to the point where normies are fully seeing the narrative laid out. And I don't think that's a good thing for them. That's not a good thing for them getting away with whatever it is that we think they might try to get away with.
Yeah. And the media is another example of, like, just like I said about Elizabeth Warren, like, they just get their marching orders and run with them. Right. And so, we've been kind of keeping an eye on different sects of the media and them responding differently to different things and running different narratives, sometimes contradictory narratives. Like, maybe they're cut off. Maybe they just don't have anybody giving marching orders right now. And so, yeah, maybe they thought they were going to get away with stealing another election, but the actualization never actualized. So, yeah, yep. This part is interesting, how they're responding and trying to cope with this win. But then to the deep state side and what they might actually be doing here. Let's get into this nuclear story. So, yeah. And this might be a little confusing. I'm going to try my best to keep it like in a linear fashion, but there's kind of a lot to it and what I want to say. But this is what I now anticipate being the go-to move for the deep state, if there is going to be one, because there's some stuff from Trump's first term on his way out the door, some moves that Trump made that are kind of telling us this might be where to key in on. Okay, so let's start with this. You guys remember the Russia-Ukraine story? It's been ongoing for years. Very recently, like right after Trump won the election, Biden gives the green light for Ukraine to shoot United States weapons, so weapons we provided them, long-range missiles into Russia. And we've even seen clips that are allegedly of those missiles being shot into Russia. And I believe some NATO weapons, like from the UK, have also been shot into Russia.
Yeah, UK, and they're even called Storm Shadow missiles, which are very scary.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, here's some other narratives going on, and this has to specifically do with nuclear weapons, and that's key to this, because this is what made me look into what Trump did before leaving office. But here's Medvedev. The transfer of nuclear weapons to Kyiv is NATO's preparation for a conflict with Russia. Moscow considers the possibility of transferring nuclear weapons to the Kyiv regime as preparation for a nuclear conflict with Russia. You have Russia raises nuclear stakes. Putin pushed through changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. The doctrine now says an attack from a non-nuclear state, if backed by a nuclear power, will be treated as a joint assault on Russia. So basically saying Ukraine attacked us with American weapons, that's a joint attack by both of them. Like,
which is pretty based because like if you strip away whatever your reactions are to the nuclear scare stuff, they're basically saying going forward we are no longer going to recognize that there are proxy wars. We're going to just directly call out that because it's not just that they're going to use Iron Man style, they're going to use American or British weapons. The idea here is that NATO and the American regime are calling for strikes against Russia. So Russia is responding and saying, you are threatening us by proxy of another nation, and then they're carrying out your threats. That's an attack.
Yeah. They also talk in this article about a new type of missile, and Russia could, if it chose, use this new missile to deliver a nuclear weapon. And then we have another story here where this was allegedly a Russian deserter. And so I don't know if this is almost one of the ones I thought was most interesting, because this could be a totally made up human being. Like, this person might not even exist, and they're just trying to tell a story, which we know the media does things like this. And so the story here, just forgetting the source, the story that is being painted is Russia is ready and has been ready to shoot a nuclear weapon since day one. Okay. Again, Russia wants to use nukes. Big storyline. And then here, Russia-Ukraine war, Kyiv could receive nuclear weapons after major drone attack. Russia gets attacked by our long-range missiles. They respond with a multi-wave drone attack, and now that is going to be used potentially as a justification to provide Ukraine with nuclear weapons as a deterrent. That's what they're saying. And these stories I just pulled, like, these were over the course of the last week and a half, and I haven't even looked at all today. I think I posted this yesterday. I haven't looked at all today, so I don't even know what news stories are out there. But
we saw Medvedev giving some hilarious comments. I think it was maybe yesterday, where he was saying, he said, I predicted Biden's senility, like the senile old man Biden was going to try to get Trump into World War III before he left office. So it's like we've got Medvedev coming out and just sounding like he's shitposting from the Badlands comments section. Like, the senile old man's going to start World War III and try to put it on Trump, and we knew this was coming. What a joke. Which also doesn't read to me like super threatening Russian rhetoric.
Well, there's so many layers to this, okay? Because let's start with the baseline assumption, and this is one that we can't prove technically, but a lot of people in our movement believe that Trump is working with Putin, has been working with Putin before he left office, has likely been back-channeling with him since he's been out of office during this Devo term. And so those guys have the same goal
in a totally straight bros way.
Say what?
You said he was back-channeling with Putin. I just wanted to clarify, not in a gay way, in a totally like we're bros, Sovereign Alliance bros sort of back-channel way.
Well, is like back-channeling a gay term? Or is that like something?
Sounds a little gay. I don't know. I wouldn't back-channel with you, man.
Okay, now I'm totally confused.
I might talk to you through back channels, but I wouldn't back channel with you like it's some kind of verb in and of itself.
See, I feel like you made it gay by pointing this out. Whatever.
I was specifically saying that it wasn't gay.
But you felt the need to do that.
You know what? Things have gotten a little gay. Let's just move on. I'm just saying they're bros.
Whose fault is that?
They're just yours. Bros being dudes.
Okay. Everybody in the entire chat understood exactly what I was saying. Bernie Bright made it gay a little bit, but we're still on point here.
Yeah, exactly.
We believe they've been working together, and so that's our baseline assumption. Okay. Right. They have the same common enemy in the deep state. They've worked together with a common enemy before. They're doing it again with the deep state. The Biden regime is that deep state. The CIA is that deep state. State Department, DHS, all these people, all these entities. If you're those guys, right? They've been quiet. You either want to figure out a way to prevent Trump from taking office, and if that doesn't work, you want to leave him with as much chaos as possible. Okay? They're clearly setting the table for some sort of war. Like, they're basically egging on Russia and saying Russia's been ready to use nuclear weapons since day one.
Yeah.
What they need and want is Russia to actually fire a nuclear weapon into Ukraine. That is what they are like trying to get to happen. And now there's stories basically saying that Ukraine might be given nuclear weapons as a deterrent. So this is the hypothetical that I put on Twitter is, what if we see a false flag nuclear attack? What if the CIA goes and sets off a nuclear bomb in Ukraine, the whole world is going to be like, oh, that was clearly Russia who did that, right? And then there's your justification. And whether it's the current Biden administration using that as justification to get more directly involved, or like, what if Trump comes in and everybody's like, yeah, Russia just set off a nuke here? Like, how do you respond to that? Okay, so that's the chaos that could potentially come. A total speculative situation here, but I'm just throwing it out there. And the reason I think it's interesting and even plausible now is because once I started seeing this pattern, and this pattern has been ongoing for a while, but I started digging into some of Trump's old NSPMs, okay? And I knew a lot of them have to do with nuclear stuff, but I want to point this out. So let me share this. These are the NSPMs, again, the National Security Presidential Memorandums. Talked about these numerous times throughout my series and on the DPH, but Trump issued, I think it was 27 or 28 in his first 1,000-some days in office. It was averaged like 52.7 or 3 a day for his first 4 years. The last 10 days in office, he issued 9 of these bad boys. Yeah. So on his way out the door, and that's totally unprecedented. You can go back to like even Reagan, I think, and the most any of them have done was like 1 or maybe 2 in the last 3 months of their presidency. Trump issued 9 in his last 10 days. Just boom, boom, boom. Some of these are still missing and classified. We don't know what they are. 29, 30, 32, I think we found at one point. I think it was Cat the Great that found it. But anyway, so let's look at a couple of these. This one has to do with nuclear, stockpile stewardship and nuclear testing. So if you're doing stewardship of your stockpile, you're making sure that you maintain awareness of where your nukes are at. Okay, that's how I read that. Couldn't actually find any documentation on it. Number 2, let's look at this one. Yeah. NSPM 34, designating the National and Nuclear Risk Reduction Center. This is a notable one. If you go look, the renaming of the National and Nuclear Risk Reduction Center. Let me find my glasses here. The NRRC has officially been renamed. So it was originally Nuclear Risk Reduction Center, and now it's National and Nuclear Risk Reduction Center. They added the word national because of NSPM 34. Like, so why? That seems pretty like random. Like, what is the need for that? But the reason the center even exists is notable. This measure acknowledges the increasingly broad and evolving role the center has assumed since its inception in 1988, when it was established as a secure, rapid, and reliable means of communication with the Soviet Union on a range of arms control issues. While the communications line with Russia remains a fundamental aspect of the NRRC's mission, the center, run by the State Department, has adapted to the evolving international security environment. That's probably the national part, but this is what it does. It currently works in 6 languages, operates 24 hours a day, and it's basically a back channel.
Yeah.
Like this, I believe, if you actually watch the movie Sum of All Fears, like they are talking on the NRRC line with Russia. Like that's a 24-hour back channel communication so that it minimizes the risk of armed conflict that could result from an accident, miscalculation, or misunderstanding on a range of issues that impact national security. Okay, so this is notable. Yeah. That this was changed on his way out the door. Was he highlighting it? Did they really need to add that one word to the beginning of it? I don't know. Do you have anything to add so far?
Well, recently, I don't know. We probably talked about it on Power Hour as well, but a couple of weeks ago, Chris and I did the movie 13 Days on Story Hour. Then on Sunday night, Abs and I talked about it again. But the whole theme of that movie, the Cuban Missile Crisis, is back channels. It's what entered the word into the public domain in a major way. And all of these moves that you're highlighting here, the reason that there was this just known part of policy back channel between the American president and the Soviet or Russian president is a direct result of the environment that Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev were navigating. There's a great scene in that movie that exemplifies why it was needed. And I think the undercurrent of, a lot of your theorizing here about a false flag and even how that reads, why would the wording need to be changed? Why would anything need to be changed here? It's the recognition that the deep state is in the house. It's in the establishment. So the people that Kennedy was navigating was the military-industrial complex, who were trying to fire warning shots over Russian ships in in the Atlantic in the hopes that it would trigger a response. So this is exactly why you need this kind of stuff, and I think that that's a major reason we're seeing a lot of those reruns now, prepping the mindscape to look at stuff like this. And so if there was actual changes going on to the doctrine that you're highlighting, I personally feel like none of this stuff was left to chance. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but it makes me wonder if these changes had been made and they're now kind of being these agreements had been made.
What agreements?
Between peace deals, like we were talking about in the last segment, peace deal between Trump and Russia, de-escalation pact, essentially, the promises from the West to the East, from Trump to Russia, that Ukraine isn't going to join NATO, the red lines aren't going to be crossed. That's all. If those promises were all made, it all would be, I think, against the backdrop of, hey, the deep state in both of our nations, but especially the US, might try something like this. It's not us if and when they do.
Yeah, and that's what I think this is highlighting. So,
yeah,
again, the key point from this is one of these NSPMs on the way out the door was just adding the word national ahead of the current existing back channel to Russia. I think they were just like highlighting this, like, hey guys, we're doing this. You guys need to know this thing exists. They were pointing this out for a reason. And it literally just says this measure acknowledges the increasingly broad and evolving role the center assumed. This thing was totally unnecessary. Could have just remained the nuclear risk reduction center and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
If anything, adding national ahead of it, when it says something about international here at the end, it makes it even more weird. But again, highlighting this thing, that's notable. Let's go back to the NSPMs here. And there's two of them. I'm actually going to show this one first. NSPM 36 is Guidelines for United States Government Intra-Agency Response to Terrorist Incidents in the United States and Overseas. Okay? This is the third one. Now, NSPM 35, National Technical Nuclear Forensics. On here, it doesn't actually have a date, but I found an article where they discussed this NSPM, and it was somebody who has inside info, or maybe they work for one of the government agencies that this was given out to, because it's classified other than to the government agencies. And we're going to read through some of this report, but I want to show you one of the things it says is we have a date for it now. It's January 19th. So January 19th of 2021 is when NSPM 35 came out, National Technical Nuclear Forensics. Now let's read through a couple things here. I'm just going to find which ones I want to read, which sections. Okay. I think it's the very first one. Yeah, let's read this very first paragraph. And I'll post this in the chat. Article titled Assessing U.S. Nuclear Forensics, Findings, Recommendations, and Conclusions. I don't think it has a date on here, but clearly it's been since 2021. Oh, that's the wrong article. Okay, just post in the chat now. Oh, dang it. It's only letting me send a Axios. Can you send this in the chat, man? I just posted our private one. Okay, the United States uses its early warning system and a robust and reliable retaliatory nuclear and conventional counterstrike capability to deter overt attack from states with nuclear weapons. Deterrence of a covert, undeclared, or disguised nuclear attack, or the smuggling of material or devices needed to carry out the attack, requires the ability to identify who is responsible and the knowledge that the perpetrator will be identified in a timely fashion.
Wow, that's juicy.
Yes. So far, they're talking about like black
CIA.
market. And CIA, yeah. By analyzing interdicted nuclear material, an interdicted nuclear device, or the signals and debris produced by the device after it is used, nuclear forensics supports attributing who provided the materials and expertise used to make the device and helps to determine the history of those materials and nature of the expertise. I should probably also clarify that if you don't believe nukes are real, that is totally okay. We're just talking about the story of a nuclear now and the story of forensics on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're talking about if a black market nuke gets launched and explodes, the nuclear forensics is what is used to determine who basically supplied the material and built it and exploded it.
which this all reads as not just this all reads not just as process, but as a narrative deployment in and of itself, as a threat or a warning to those clandestine actors. It reminds me of the drops of Playbook Known, right? Like we know what one of your red lines sort of, this would be the break glass in case of emergency thing, and the Patriots are saying here, we know how to find out who did this.
Well, keep in mind, like who wrote this, I don't think they have anything to do with, like, this is just some think tank, but they're talking about nuclear forensics. And the reason we're reading about it is because Trump, in the second to last NSPM that he put out there, it was about national technical nuclear forensics. And they talk about a few of NSPM 35 in this article, and that's what we're going to read about. So anyway, let me keep going. National technical nuclear forensics goals include enhancing deterrence and enabling prevention with credible publicized NTNF capabilities. Those capabilities are implied publicly in part by, for example, U.S. national laboratory experts, relevant and significant scientific academic publications. NSPM 35 includes as a primary objective to convey the message to potential adversaries that a nuclear or radiological attack will be investigated and attributed to the state, terrorist group, or non-state sponsor responsible. That is a direct quote from NSPM 35.
They're telling you it's literally a narrative deployment to these people.
The deterrent value of nuclear forensics has increased in importance since the Cold War. This is due to the multiplicity of states with nuclear weapons, an increase in states with emerging or latent nuclear capabilities, interdictions of fissile materials outside of regulatory control that indicate the existence of a black market for such materials, the proliferation of terrorist organizations that might use nuclear weapons if they could, and the increased interest that some nations have shown in harboring terrorist organizations to execute attacks on their behalf. So this whole thing, very notable, because they're talking about the black market. They're basically saying that we have the capability. The entire reason this NSPM was created was to figure out who actually shot the thing or blew it up and attribute it to the right group of people. Okay. I want to get to the next part here. I think there's just going to be one more paragraph that I read from this. Yeah, it's this one. As the committee was gathering data and writing this report, presidential policy guidance designed to replace a previous Obama administration PPD, Presidential Policy Directive, was being developed. Signed. Ooh, that's interesting. Now I really want to know when the date was, because I misread that at the beginning. While this report was being written, the guidance was being designed or was being developed. Yeah, I'd be curious to find when this came out. If you have that thing, you should check. Oh, it just says 2021. Okay, but anyway, I'll keep going. It was signed on January 19th. NSPM 35 and the implementation plan transitioned several of the DHS's NTNF roles to the NNSA and codifies existing interagency and National Security Council entities to provide the primary oversight, guidance, and coordination for the NTNF program. So that's National Technical Nuclear Forensics being taken out of the DHS, which I think is important, and being put into the NNSA. And I'll just show you this quick. The NNSA is a United States federal agency responsible for safeguarding national security through the military application of nuclear science. And they are part of the DOE. Jill Ruby. Oh, never mind. That was somebody else. But yeah, they're a semi-autonomous agency within the DOE, Department of Energy, which isn't that a big Q thing? Pretty sure it is, but
yeah.
Okay, continuing on with this real quick. No, actually, that's all I need to say, I think, from there.
Totally randomly, I was looking in the footnotes, and one of their main ones, the page is no longer active, but one of their main footnotes is from the National Interest. And who are these people? Looks like it's a magazine. But when you look at what's all over the National Interest's screens right now, it's pretty funny.
While you're looking, oh,
shadow over Ukraine. Right? It's like that's what they're talking about, and the footnote was a magazine article, "The Evolving Missions of Technical Nuclear Forensics," that this report that you're in cites.
Yeah.
So they're tying all of this obviously to Ukraine. That was 2021.
Here's a metaphor for you guys. So think of our election system, right? We believe our election system is a little sus, to say the least, a little suspect. We don't trust that the machines work, but we're being told by all these people that they do. Like, they're safe, they're secure, there's no such thing as the switching votes or whatever. The people telling us that is CISA, right? Part of the DHS. And like people like CrowdStrike who actually, run the cybersecurity on those machines. What they did here, like CISA and the DHS, they were the ones that were overseeing the National Technical Nuclear Forensics Group until this NSPM switched it over to the DOE. So took it out of those hands. So it'd be the same thing. If there was a nuke that went off, we would rely on the DHS at the time to be the ones that go in and determine where they would be the ones to attribute it, right? Like, remember when CrowdStrike got a hold of the servers and we're like, yeah, it was definitely Russia. It was Cozy Bear or Lazy Bear, whoever did it, hacked Hillary's emails in the DNC. Do we trust that actually happened?
Yeah, well, then think about when you're saying, I mean, it's not directly related to this specific one or this specific deployment, but the DHS in general. Think back to when that was created. Like, this is former liberal brain. At the time, liberals who were trying to educate themselves during the Bush era were up in arms over the DHS, over the formation of the DHS. Not because we necessarily thought that everybody in the DHS is some sort of deep state criminal. Of course not. But it was the auspices or the circumstances under which the Department of Homeland Security was founded as a ready-made rapid solution after the 9/11 attacks, and what this whole community, or most of us, think was going on there and think was involved there. Isn't it interesting that they really felt like we needed entire new administrations or agencies to deal with this, that sort of skirted maybe a little bit away from constitutional mandate and the rule of American law. So again, it doesn't mean everybody involved with DHS is a bad actor. That's just like Cash says about the FBI. But there's a difference between, a corrupt president, which is otherwise an office that the American people have long codified as representing our mandate, as long as we get the corruption out of there. There's a big difference between that and agencies or departments like Homeland Security, which was created as a response to what most of us think is a false flag. So to tie it back to your logic train there, isn't it funny that it's always DHS offshoots, just like in other theaters, it's CIA offshoots. You can tie these threads of deterrence and of investigations back to a lot of these agencies that were created specifically to carry out and then obfuscate on behalf of the deep state.
Yeah. So, okay. From the beginning to the end here, real quick, what I'm laying out. We have four NSPMs in Trump's waning days, and they tell a story. You have the United States stockpile stewardship and nuclear testing having to do with nukes, like making sure we know where our nukes are. We have designating the National Nuclear Risk Reduction Center by adding one word, drawing attention to what that is, but it's the back channel to Russia over nuclear warfare. We have the National Technical Nuclear Forensics saying, like, hey, if a dirty bomb goes off somewhere, we're going to be able to figure out who did it. And we're taking it out of the deep state's pocket, like you just laid out, and putting it with somebody that we could hopefully trust. Right. I'm assuming they would only do that for a reason. And then the guidelines for response to terrorist incidents in the United States and overseas. Okay, so it's like telling the story, and it has to do with nuclear weapons. And then we're seeing this situation play out over in Russia and Ukraine while Trump is coming in and Biden's walking out the door. There's a story being created there. Like, these two things are connected, in my opinion. Yeah. Like, whether it's being directed this way, or they're like, yeah, we know they're going to do this at some point. We know they have these capabilities. Like, this is our warning to you that if you try some bullshit, you're not going to get away with it. Because could you imagine what it would do if there was a nuke that went off, okay, and it came out that it was the CIA or the United States like that was behind it, and then Trump was still able to make peace with that situation.
Right.
I mean, that would be insane. But I wouldn't put it past them to try.
Yeah, of course. This is a little bit, I mean, I shouldn't say it's out there for the stuff we talk about, but I really think, I think you're bang on in terms of why all of these changes were made. I think that if the enemy did have the actual levers of power, whether that's clandestine or public, to pull a false flag like that off, anything that could get us into war with Russia, they would do it. Fully on board with that. I do also believe in the devolution operation and believe that patriots are in full control of things like this. Like that this is certainly a national essential function. I like the wording of international there because it's talking about...
Can I interject on that part there? Just the NEF. And I don't mean to interrupt, but like I wouldn't consider this an NEF because it wouldn't be... A nuke going off in Ukraine is not the United States. If it was the United States, that's different.
Would though. I think it would though, and I think some of the wording, there's a gray area here for sure.
I don't know.
I would say there is because when it's all about the why, it's all about the motive, and if the national essential function is about American national security, sovereign national security, and if you know that an act by Americans, ostensibly CIA or whatever, has a high likelihood of drawing your nation into a war based on a false flag, preventing that thing from happening elsewhere in the world is preventing you from going into this war. So I think that you could, if you're the commander in chief and you've got quite a bit of latitude, or if you're the combatant commanders in the devolution scenario, I think you've got quite a bit of latitude when it comes to how you define national essential functions.
Yeah, I mean, I see the point you're making. I personally don't believe it fits the definition, but I could see your logic train there and where it would, because just think of the scenario playing out. If the CIA launched blew up a nuke in Ukraine, and then everybody in the world blamed it on Russia, but Russia and Putin and Trump are like backchanneling, and they're like, yeah, we didn't do that, man. We know, that wasn't us, right? While everybody's like pushing the United States and NATO and all these countries to get into a direct war and maybe even nuclear war with Russia, while Russia, Putin, and Trump are like, yeah, they didn't do this. Like the immediate aftermath of that situation, you're absolutely right. That right there,
it's existential. I mean, you're now granted, I definitely agree that there's a bit of a step change there from like what's the national essential function to what's going on. It could be as simple as the back channel itself. Preserving the back channel itself maybe is more directly part of those national essential functions, especially when you're reading about these NSPMs, talking about back channels, talking about international policy when it comes to nuclear weapons. Like that might be the more direct application of national essential functions, saying like, hey, we as the combatant commanders, let's say for the sake of argument, we might not have a lot of direct levers to pull in Kiev, but we're going to maintain responsible communication and back channels to share as much intelligence as we can to prevent this. It's almost like second order. But the real theory I was going to suggest is, I've been using this term translation layers, again, war of stories stuff. I think a lot of what's going on here is that when I think of the Q drops that say playbook known, I think that we're seeing essentially a story by patriots that is controlled by patriots that is translating to the global mind. This is what the enemy, this is what the regime had planned for you. I mean, the Q drops talk about the 16-year plan. I've said before on many shows, before I was a Trump supporter, I blackpilled on the Clintons, and it was because of the rhetoric against Russia. So they've been wanting to spin this up forever. There's a reason the Obama regime, they were the ones behind the coup, the Maidan coup, and Putin seized Crimea, right? They wanted the war then. Hillary was the one promising this, right? Like, do we really think that, let's say Hillary won in 2016, Do we think that Hillary is all of a sudden going to attack Russia? Like, no way. She wouldn't have the public mandate to attack Russia. But if something happened in the Donbass when Hillary was president, we would have gotten the exact scenario that you're laying out here that the deep state wanted. So I kind of think we're seeing that this isn't going to happen on an actual level in terms of we're not going to World War III with Russia, but I absolutely do believe everyone's going to think we are. And that's the key. You know, like we're never going to be able to prove this, but this is why I sometimes say I think there's gray area in patriots are lying to us. It's like, well, if they're telling you this was literally the playbook was for the CIA to set off a dirty bomb in Kyiv or Zaporizhia or Chernobyl and blame it on Russia to get us to World War III, might we see a narrative run of that story that exposes all these people? Because you can still, you and I were talking privately about this when you were sending me, when you were telling me about this research, the NSPMs. And man, it was just making me think of all the revelations that a lot of the Q community and the truth community has been built up on in the modern era, and the stuff Trump was publicly commenting on before he was president. It was all about Obama and the Iran nuclear deal, Uranium One and the Clintons. Like, this could be a way to not just expose the regime currently trying to get us to World War III, but this could be a way to expose how far back it goes. Like, what were the Clintons and the Obamas doing with American nuclear warheads? Who were they funding? Why were they funding them? And what was the CIA involved with?
Yeah. Well, okay. So my counterpoint to that would be, I don't think they would want this situation to play out. Like, if this happens, I do not.
Yeah, not
believe,
really.
Well, yeah, I do not believe it would have been a white hat controlled op to like a controlled demo to expose this stuff, because they can expose this stuff whenever they want if they have the real information. Like, they can expose it whenever they want when Trump's back in there. They can declassify whatever they want, and they can tell the story of what they were trying to do. I don't think that the current Biden administration has any control over the nuclear arsenal. I don't. I think we've seen even hints of them not having any control over the military anymore. Like, there's been stuff that's happened in the Middle East where, the military has contradicted Biden on multiple occasions. Like, that's part of what Devo is. Like, and maybe it's gone a little more like literal lately, where they kind of disobey some orders and some things from the Biden administration. But I don't believe Biden has the nuclear football. He has a bag, maybe, but I don't think he has the actual codes to do whatever the football allows him to do. And so, that being said, their only option to to do something here would be some sort of nuke that is a black market nuke, a dirty bomb. That's it. And so that would require, I don't know, if we see it happen, then it's like it's accounted for. The Patriots, the control the Patriots have over the situation is the response to it in a lot of ways. Maybe like that's where maybe it just has to get more direct. The back channel's there with Putin and Russia. They're not going to let Putin take the fall for a CIA bomb. But I think, like, I don't see that being like a controlled demo or anything. I think it's going. I don't think they want it to happen, but I think they're ready for it if it does. But that's the only option the left has, or the deep state has, is some sort of dirty CIA bomb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that all makes sense, and it might be true. I do think of this more as a controlled demo story than most. Admitting that, a lot of the times when people challenge people like me and Chris about and Patrick about things in the Donbass, like, let's use the Donbass as an example. I'll often get hit with comments saying, like, you're saying this is all fake. Meanwhile, you're also saying there's this denazification effort. There seems like there's contradictions there. What about this? What about the videos of these battles? Some of those videos, I can't prove all of them. Some of the videos that we're being told were happening in the Donbass in 2022 and 23. People know about the Ghost of Kyiv and the video game footage. Like, that's old hat. But some of the real war crimes that were being shown are from 2014. They're attacks that happened, they're atrocities that were committed during the Azov battalion occupation in the Donbass that then have been reseeded into the internet. Now, are those just mistakes that are being made? I think of this more as what is meant by Ghost in the Machine and the fourth psyop group that we like having fun with on this show. I think this is where there is more of a blurring of the lines that the fourth psyop group is playing with and saying, like, guys, we're not really lying to you. Like, we're showing you real things. We're just showing you them out of time because we're showing you the evils that were committed. So to bring it to right now, I don't know if this would happen, but I could see a narrative of, let's say, Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has been seeded for years now into the public narrative. I personally believe patriots are more in control of the public story than the enemy is, although the enemy's trying their hand. We could still see actuals, like we could still see some sort of attack on Zaporozhye, and then it's up to you to discern, do you think 500 people actually died in this attack, or do you think we're watching something different? Like, my thread on that, or at least my rope on that, is longer in terms of thinking that we could see real explosions and real demolitions, but the story underlying them is not necessarily accurate. To your point, the only counter I would put forward to you saying, we could just declassify this stuff like uranium-1 and all that. Yeah. That's true. That's obviously true. But I think there's a reason that the drops talked about people need to be at the precipice. I think that even though Trump has the public mandate of the majority of the country, if he did declassify the uranium-1 deal and the Iran nuclear deal and all that, I think there's too much obfuscation that could still happen with the normie hive mind, where you're going to have people being like, these were money deals, or this is because the Obama administration got tricked by the Iranian Ayatollah. It wouldn't look as nefarious to my parents as I think it looks to all of us. They'll explain it away. If they're not told anything bad happens. But to your point about this whole scenario of like a nuke or something going off in Kyiv that is blamed on Russia, and then normies find out it was the CIA, that then gives them a totally different framework with which to look at all this other stuff of previous administrations and say, there is no element of plausible deniability left to these previous regimes. Like, now we know the CIA got caught red-handed, and another thing you and I talked about yesterday, I think, is look how neatly the Nord Stream 2 reporting by Seymour Hersh also seeds the disclosure op of this. So yeah, the deep state would want to do this, but ironically, I think the fact that we know it's coming, that's when I was saying the linearity of the story, that's what keeps leading me back to the belief that patriots know this is coming. Like you said, it's accounted for. Now, if we see something happen, does that mean that they lost control of it? I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time, squaring devolution and them knowing what the playbook is going to be and it being super obvious the only chance with that they wouldn't be able to control some of the outcomes here.
I get what you're saying, but I always disagree with the full control stuff because, again, it's the morality of it, and then and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm saying people who like say full control. I don't believe Trump faked an assassination attempt, because that's what full control means to a lot of people. I can't get there, and I would see it. I mean, I don't think I've always been a believer in the enemy does have a say. Like, they're in checkmate. They're gonna lose, but they still have moves left to make. And when they're desperate, they might do the more desperate moves. We don't know. I don't think the Patriots can account for everything, but that doesn't mean they actually I don't know if they could stop a black market dirty bomb. I don't know what their capabilities are. I'd like to think they would be able to, but I don't know for sure. But and when it comes to like the scare event stuff, like think of the mainstream media and how unsuccessful they were in moving the needle on Trump. Like, they called him a fascist, all these other things. He still won the election. They let him get away with winning the election, right? They didn't steal it from him. It's because those narratives didn't work. Like, you can only say something so many times, and if there's no actual to it, if there's no truth behind it, you lose. Like it's the
Yeah.
the game theory. The truth psyops are going to beat the bullshit. At some point, for like a scare event to happen, and I think we talked about this a while ago, like a year and a half ago on one of these power hours, and I think, or maybe even longer. When did you write your scare event article? It was a while ago.
Yeah. Oh, look.
It was shortly after that.
September 2022.
Yeah, I think the scare event, like in order for something to be a scare event, like it can't be all story, because I don't think people here will have a buy-in to care enough about, like,
Yeah.
they've been doing this scare event about Russia for 3 years now. Like, people don't give a shit anymore.
Right.
If I'm just being
they have to
completely
think
honest,
it's real.
they have to think the threat is real. And so
Yeah.
even though they're inching up on like nuclear talks and all this nuclear weapons, nobody gives a shit here
Yeah.
anymore. And so
I agree.
how do you get them to give a shit? What's the point of the scare event if nobody gives a shit?
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's why I think, I mean, I totally agree with that, but you would then need something, actually scary to base the psyop, the good psyop on, which is why I'm just suggesting the actuals might be something like a controlled, I don't know, like you could have an explosion go off at the Zaporozhye power plant, and it's totally controlled and nobody actually dies, but you have real footage of this massive thing that happens in Ukraine. Sure. And my point, again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying it's possible for me to go there, and that if they knew. Sorry,
can I just say one thing before we move on from that? So say what you're about to say. But the reason I said that is because, like, when it comes to the fake and gay stuff, like, I think a lot of things are fake and gay, but at some point they need something real, and that's where I agree. I don't think you can fake a nuclear explosion, even though some people don't think nukes exist. That's fine. You can't fake a super big nuclear like explosion for it to have an effect like it would. But okay, continue on with the controlled demo stuff.
I agree with you, and I think I think that's a good. That means I wasn't clarifying kind of what my point is about the story. So I agree with you that I think for it to be effective, like, there's going to be so much attention on an event on a story like that, I mean, maybe it could be entirely narrative. I also find it hard to believe that you could get away with crafting a story like that is entirely narrative. The way I would think of it is more like, we know bad false flags are sometimes entirely narrative, but often they're actual, and it's the story that's false, right? It's like 9/11 actually happened, but the story that we're told about it did not happen. I just think that could be reversed. You know, like I often talk about this as stories as spells. Like you'll go back into Kabbalah and everything. Chris talks about this quite a bit too. They talk about narratives. Spelling, the word spelling comes from the idea that words carry power. The Q drops, I disagree with Q people's interpretations of wizards and warlocks. It says guardians of intelligence. There's references to wizards and warlocks in the Q drops. Now, maybe there's double meanings here and they're talking about the NSA, etc. My reading of that is much more about story, is that they're talking about narrative power and spell casting. It used to be that, like, in the ancient world, magic was storytelling, because they had an understanding that if you could convince a population of a story, you could literally change reality, which makes the spell real, right? Spell casting. So I just think I really think that is being reverse engineered on them. But to make a story much more believable, I agree that there's got to be actuals to it, which is what the deep state's been doing forever. They're like, hey, what do you mean 9/11 was fake, you conspiracy nuts? The towers aren't there anymore. Like, that's how they get away with it and make it believable. So could we get white hat versions of that? Of course, I would think it would be completely immoral if anybody actually died or innocent life was lost as a result of these things. But when I'm looking at like a theater like Zaporozhye or something, which is entirely under military control, like, those are the kind of environment. And I wasn't thinking of this before you were pointing out the NSPMs and the theory of a false flag in Ukraine. When I wrote the scare event, I've been thinking about the Hawaiian missile crisis, and I've always been thinking of it as like the threat of Russia nuking the US. But you're right that would be entirely narrative. So your framing of the CIA trying to actually commit a false flag in Ukraine just made me think, well, maybe that's the story, and something will go off in Ukraine, but the damages will be contained to physical infrastructure. Like, look at all these videos we're seeing of missiles going off everywhere, and then we get these reports that there was nobody killed, it was like a missile silo that was destroyed. Could you do that, but on a way bigger scale, like with a nuclear power plant, with a dirty bomb or something, but you're not actually nuking a city or killing people, and then you're like, this was the fucking CIA, and the next one they do was going to be within Moscow or something like that. Like, there's just ways I can play with it and think that an actual could happen.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and I agree. Like, that's a plausible way to do it if it was a white hat controlled thing where they would do it. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't know if I'd be okay with something like that either, because it's still a lie. This is where Chris has talked about, like, you know, we don't just want to live in psyops forever. And is one side lying about something to pin it on the other guys, even if they were actually doing something like that before, they're still technically lying to you. Are we okay with that? Right. I don't know if I am, but I mean. Yeah,
I think those are some of the most interesting conversations that go back to the Q stuff and all of it. Even devolution, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about this with devolution. Like, is Trump lying to us when he's I'm not saying this rhetorically. I mean, these are good questions.
Yeah, we've had these discussions many times.
Was Trump lying to us for 4 years? Or is it enough for you, the general you, is it enough that he gives us these nods and says we're kind of in my second term now? I mean, there are people in this audience that fucked right out of it because they were getting so sick of, you know, if you patriots knew all the damages of the Biden administration, how could you have let it happen if you could have stopped it? And I agree with you. I'm going to use your argument against yourself about the Zaporozhye thing. I think the strongest argument that anybody's ever made for the why of devolution from the PSYOP perspective is to avoid a civil war. If they have models that, just for the sake of argument, if patriots have models that suggest that a mass nuclear scare event with some actuals in it is going to lead us into an era of peace that we haven't seen before, does it then justify them kind of fucking around with stories? I don't know. It's just,
I don't know. That'd be a good another good GART panel.
Yeah.
Get multiple perspectives on that.
Like, how far is too far with PSYOPs?
Yeah.
It is. You know, and I would like to think that our handlers at the DoD, I would like to think that they like when this community is arguing about this stuff, because it's when I think about the choice to know will be yours stuff and the drops and even those comms that Trump drops, you know, like, and the stuff Chris talks about a lot. I think it's good that you feel that way about the prospect of being lied to. I'm also willing to accept that we could be right morally for feeling that way, while also they are sitting in their room with a lot more information than us and saying, hey, we get it, guys. And if we didn't have information that we do, we would feel the same way. But this is how we're choosing to do it. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I play with that in terms of Trump saying, we're returning power back to you, the people, but unfortunately we got to do some shit on the way there that maybe you wouldn't be totally on board with.
Like, if Mrs. Bright came home and was like, told you, you know, hey, some guys were hitting on me at the bar, and we were chat flirting with them, whatever. Would that, you know, she's doing that to get an emotional reaction out of you, where she could have just came directly and said, you know, I feel like we've been distant. Can we talk or whatever? Which is the right approach? Because the first way will get the reaction and get you to be like, what the fuck's going on here? You know what I mean?
But it'd be a negative reaction. She doesn't want a negative reaction.
But the computer model she used said that it would draw you closer to her long term.
Well, we're gonna divorce now as a result of you making this announcement. I want to wake her up after the show and be like, what the fuck have you been doing? Who have you been talking to? Which NSPM is this in? No, I mean, these are the questions. I think that this is the type of stuff. These are the concerns that Chris surfaces a lot when it comes to cheering on what he refers to as TV characters.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we keep having those kind of conversations.
I do too.
Trump, for me, has certainly earned my trust and our trust based on, again, your Civil War analog, I think is strong. It's like, because we also, even for normies, I think the state of the nation that had been, as Trump says, the victim of illegal psychological operations for decades, for generations, I think we would be unreasonable if we didn't allow that those psyops might require some reverse psyop engineering to untangle. And that untangling those psyops using counter psyops visits fewer damages than just ripping the Band-Aid off like a lot of us wanted. In the Matrix, they call this popping. Like if you wake some people up that are not ready for it, they pop and they completely disassociate, and you were better off leaving them plugged in. Like I think patriots, they know that people in this audience could handle these kinds of truths. But do we honestly think, as you're around your Thanksgiving family, even the MAGA ones, like, do we really think that a lot of these things, if they had been more overt 4 years ago, 8 years ago, would have been handled well by them?
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting topic of discussion, and the reason I pointed out or we brought it up tonight was because of the nuclear stories going on in Russia, Ukraine, and because of what Trump did before leaving office. Those NSPMs are notable. Like for like 4 of those last 10 or 9 NSPMs on his way out the door having to do with nuclear stuff, and the story they tell, it's got to be a reason, whether it's a warning or like foreshadowing or whatever. There's 50 some, 60 some days. I don't even know how many days we are out until inauguration, but I would not be surprised if we do see some escalation, whether real or just narrative, either way. And it's probably going to be with the nuclear stuff. So we shall see. But
I would say one more point on that too, is that the linear point I made earlier in the show, that can go both ways. You can have both arguments. The fact that going back to 2023 in particular, we had nuclear rhetoric enter the zeitgeist, like the public consciousness, in a way it hadn't since the 50s and 60s. Well, and then the 80s. We had that again during Reagan. And it wasn't just because there was news about Russia and Ukraine. It was because one of the highest grossing and Academy Award winning movies of this era was all about Oppenheimer, all about nuclear war, right? Those movies take years and years and years to get off the ground. Oppenheimer wasn't spun up organically because the media machine was reacting to the incursion into the Donbass in 2022. They had that shit in the oven. The biggest show on Amazon Prime last year was Fallout, which is all about, 1950s alternate future to alternate past type of thing, right? So you have all of that. Then this week, you've got Joe Rogan, the biggest mouthpiece in the world, like laying out in my opinion, a paint-by-numbers normie version of this narrative by saying, look, Biden's being a madman, Russia's warning him, they're trying to set Trump up. It's so linear to me that it's either, like, whoever is controlling the story, somebody is controlling the story. You're allowed to think that it's the enemy, that they've been trying to seed all this stuff into the public mind, but I also think it's possible to think that it's us saying, hey, pay attention to this stuff, this is what they had planned for you. Yeah. And as you said earlier in the show, I said this in the Righteous Russia series almost 3 years ago, the best possible way you could get Trump fully imprinted onto like a bipartisan collective mind is being seen as the solver of this kind of problem.
Yeah. I mean, we've known for a while that Trump's like ultimate goal is to basically denuclearize the world. Like he doesn't want anybody working with nukes. And I think the way you get that to kick off is a nuke going off and some bad actors doing it. And could you imagine if he got like the whole world to denuclearize before he leaves office next? I mean, that'd be insane.
And then the arguments over whether or not they were ever real is going to be hilarious, because people who are like, they're definitely real and you're all crazy are going to have to contend with the fact that they all disappeared forever onward, and that we'll never have to worry about them ever again, even in 100 years.
That will be pretty funny. But All right, it's Thanksgiving Eve. Let's plug a few things and read some boosts and some rants. So first of all, if you guys were with us in Myrtle Beach, just want to say thank you. It was awesome at GART 6, and we already got GART 7 scheduled, and tickets are now available. They went available publicly on Monday, and we have, I just checked this morning, we have sold 51% of our total available tickets to this point.
Oh my goodness.
And so they are flying off the shelf. Get your tickets. Go to our website, badlandsmedia.tv/events. March 6th through the 9th in Las Vegas. Going to be a great time. Cannot wait. Yeah, get your tickets. And I would get them sooner rather than later. I know we sometimes get some last minute shoppers, which is cool. Totally cool. We sold a whole bunch to Myrtle Beach, but I don't know if there's going to be last minute available. We may not have single day or weekend tickets available or whatever. So if you want to come,
yeah. So for people to understand about Myrtle Beach, the Thursday and Friday sold out. The only reason that on that one we were able to sell the single day tickets on Saturday and Sunday is because the venue was able to open up more space on those 2 days. I don't think that that's the case in Vegas.
No,
I think it is what it is. The capacity is what it is for the whole weekend.
We may be able to figure some stuff out, but like we're not as like for Saturday, Sunday, we had a whole other room. Like they doubled the size of our room essentially. We're not gonna be able to double the size of the one here. So, but yeah. Anyway, get your tickets, guys. We'd love to see you here. If you haven't, like, ask somebody in the chat how GART was. If you're curious or interested in maybe attending, just ask somebody in the current Rumble chat. Hey, do you think I should come to GART? Like, what's your experience with GART?
Mm-hmm.
The attendees who have been to one will tell you they are amazing. The community you build, the friendships you build, like can't say enough great things about it. So
all winnings too in the Badlands audience are split among speakers. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. We've told you in advance.
You wish. What else was I gonna say? I thought there was one more thing, but whatever. Do you got the boost pulled up?
I do. There's one from Film Pro Joe, $17. What do you guys think of Trump nominating former Oregon Rep. Lori Chavez DeRemer as labor secretary? I've heard folks say she's a rhino, but I'm not so sure. I really know.
What was the name?
Lori Chavez DeRemer.
Don't know.
DeRemer. I know nothing about her, to be totally honest. But I'm cool with it if Trump's cool with it. That's all the boosts. We read the ones from last week.
Okay, awesome. And then got a few rants here. LISOPRN is now a monthly supporter. Thank you. DAC8869, how's it going, man? $5 challenge for BB Bright, and I'm not talking about burning. Hope you're well, real Miss Bright. Go Leafs. Mine an extra for 3 of my friends that may not be able. Thank you, Dak.
She doesn't even follow hockey these days, man. She became a closet Bruins fan, and now the Bruins kind of suck, so she's just like a disillusioned Leafs fan. The Leafs will end up winning while she's not following them. That's what's going to end up happening.
Well, if that gets close to happening, she'll start following them again and pretend like
the reason is she's admitted this. She's basically admitted this, and she's not here to refute it. While the Leafs are very talented, they're a bunch of pussies. And when she watches Bruins games, even when they suck, they're not pussies, and she likes that better. So that's kind of the thing going on with a lot of Toronto people these days. Is when your leader, ironically being an American, Austin Matthews, looks like he's kind of a pedophile. Just looks that way. I'm not saying he is. He's got that look about him. It just doesn't pump you up that much.
You know who has got the second or third best record in the NHL right now?
Yeah, little Kareel's doing well over there.
Yeah, Minnesota
You guys
Wild.
are nothing without Charlie Coyle, Weymouth's own Charlie Coyle.
Nah, you never needed him. Never needed him. We'll take the Russian. We'll be just fine. Oh, hold on, got more rants. Oh yeah, speaking of Dak, he finally conned me into giving him.
He didn't even zap anybody.
Moderator status. So I'm curious to see how long this lasts. Like,
yeah,
I gave it to him the other night. I don't remember what show I was watching. It might have been during Basis Conspiracies. Like, you know what? He's been asking forever. I basically ignored his request. So I apologize for doing it. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm here. He's here. There's some trolls. Let's just see what happens. And I was expecting to have to revoke it by the end of Baseless Conspiracies, and I did. And he's been very responsible. I'm very proud of him. So
Nice.
not regretting doing that at all.
He gave me a repair kit for my slippers. But
Well, I better get a pair of bedazzled
that's a
slippers now
woman's job.
because I gave him authority in our chats.
The problem is everybody just thinks I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan.
Oh, because of your gay tiger thing?
Like, no, don't you understand? My
I
brand.
didn't know gay dudes like tiger paintings.
Where did he like? I want to know where he came up with his speaking style.
I don't know. But
Such
I
a strange inflection.
love it. 1027 JS, $20. Happy Thanksgiving to the Badlands crew and fans. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you always showing us the support and love. W True Love 2823. Very thankful for and believe God led me to Badlands. I used to have extreme anxiety about the future. After discovering you on Rumble, I am now calm and serene. Happy Thanksgiving and much love. Wonder if that has to do with some CB Distillery as well. Helps that calm and focus. But thank you for that rant. Appreciate it. Astro Emmy, you're not alone, BB. My hubby is a forester and can find his way through the woods, no problem, but gets totally lost in a mall or department store.
A Subaru Forester?
Speaking of gay, the number one car for lesbians. Oh, you missed the Liberty End the other night when I showed that South Park clip. I'll send it in our chat because I'm not going to play it on here. But I was like, speaking of Subaru, I got to show you guys this clip. It was so bad.
I
but
never
so
watched
funny.
that show, but it's so good. Anytime I see it, it's so good.
There's just a clip for everything. But yeah, I'll send it to you. Wedged Gravy, happy Thanksgiving. Can I audition for Kyle Slot? Thank you for the Thanksgiving wishes, but
You're
we're
in.
currently not holding auditions.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
No, apparently not.
What?
I know. My dog could come on as a third.
I don't know if we need a third. I mean, eventually we'll get there. We've had a lot of people throw their name in the mix. I just don't want to force it. Just want it to be a natural fit. So we'll see.
That's what she said.
That is what she said. Brando Commando. He's got like 4 in a row here. It's pretty obvious. We all know the deep state cabal, whatever you want to call it, wants nuclear war. The fact it hasn't happened tells you there's something going on. Stopping it. Devolution. Yep. They don't have control of the nukes. It's kind of lame to get yourself into a nuclear war if you don't have control of nukes to fire back.
True.
But that's why, like, the weird timing of this, of getting the nuclear war, like getting to that precipice right before Trump gets in, who does have the control, like, hey, good luck with this situation.
That's the stuff why it's equally valid to say, well, are we being lied to? But then it's also like, hey, I mean, drops from 7 years ago were saying we're going to be at the precipice, so we're going to have a peacemaker story. Like, well, they didn't say the peacemaker thing, but they talked about Trump and Putin. Like, they talked about the 16-year plan, and it's like it's all coming back around in such perfect cycle.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to get away from, definitions of full control vary widely, but it's impossible to get away from, how about this? Full knowledge of enemy plans, I think might be the most conservative way to say it when they're talking about playbook known. They know and have accounted for enemy plans. Does that mean they can stop every single one of them? That's, I think, where the argument comes in. But they certainly aren't surprised by anything, I don't think.
Yeah. More rants from him. Brando Commando. Also, it's all fake news gay. Again, happy Thanksgiving to the Badland podcasters. I'm thankful for your research and time. Thank you. Maybe Q is wrong and we don't have a mascara event. I'd be cool with that. Thank you for all those.
Could be. It feels like we are going to get it, but hey, who knows?
I wouldn't necessarily say any of it's wrong. Like, depends on your reading. Some people say that some of it's misinformation on purpose,
Yeah.
Who knows? Wedged Gravy. Delta for scare event is a 113.
Interesting
timing.
I mean, that would be a massive proof if that ended up happening.
Oh yeah. Rambo and friends. Nice to see you, Rambo. How you doing, man? Is it lying if it's a controlled presentation of truth exposure of very real threats. Here's the thing, like, this is my thoughts on it. All psyops are pretty much lies. Like, there's a form of truth psyops like you're talking about, but psyop is by nature and definition lying. The thing is like it's up to each individual what level of lies and psyops you are comfortable with and okay with, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. Some people have a much less tolerance for lying than others, and that's totally fine. There may not be a right answer, especially from us when we do not have access to the same information as the ones putting on the psyops. So
yeah, I agree with that, and this is where I can square, Chris saying at some point the psyops have to end with every time I go far down that rabbit hole, I come back around to the choice to know will be yours. We're on this show talking about what we think the actuals are, which means that the psyops really have literally the psyops have no impact on us because we think we see them. So it does get to a certain point, I think, devil's advocate in favor of Patriot psyops, where if you're falling for the psyops, you haven't done the work. It's like Bitcoiners say, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. I sort of start applying that to the truth. Like, ultimately, you get the truth at the price you deserve. If you want to keep just burying your head in the sand and thinking everything the media tells you is true, then it is what it is. And I think maybe that goes for Patriot psyops too. Like, there's a way to discern what's going on, we think, what's true and what's not. And if you're not able to do that, then you haven't put the work in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like that framing. Don't think I have a counter. I might have a couple counters, but I got to chew on them a little bit.
Do you lie to your kids? Get them to do stuff?
Try not to. I really try. I think about this often too. Like every now and then they'll ask a question and I'll say like, I don't know when I do know. And so I consider that to be a line. Like I've thought about this so many times, man. Like go to bed and I like, do I lie to my kids? And I do, but is it good, bad? Like I feel bad.
I know that's the easiest analogy in the world and like stupid, but I also think that there's some of that going on. And I don't, with Patriots, I mean, and I don't think that we should take that as, oh, we're so stupid and we're children. Really, a sympathetic lensing to put over it is Trump saying, like, the American people, all our sleeping family members, etc., they're victims. I mean, they drive us nuts, but it's like they've been put into this infantile state of mind where they're looking at things. Ultimately, I agree that we need to break out of it, but I also think that Patriots are kind of coming forward and saying, these people cannot be spoken. Like G-Money's always like, you want to be spoken to like children. But unfortunately, I think that there are huge swaths of American society that cannot be spoken to like adults, like InfoWar adults.
I get what you're saying, but like when I don't want to come off as like a bad parent here because I don't lie to my kids unless it's something that I feel like I'm not allowed to speak on. Like
it's not about you.
Like there's some things that have gone on in this last summer. Like you're aware of it, BB. I don't think I've publicly spoken about it with the audience, and I don't know if I'm quite ready to. Some of you might know, but they ask questions, a lot of questions about that. Like, why don't we get to do this anymore? Why haven't we seen these people in it? Like certain things like that. And me saying I don't know, like I consider that to be a lie because I do know, but it's not. I don't have it's not my right to tell them that. It has
your
to come
intention
from
is to
their
protect
mother.
them as well.
Exactly, but that's I see that as being different because I'm not disclosing something versus I don't know. This is a whole other
and there's gray area. I always end up
debate,
arguing like I'm on the side of the psyops just because that's what I think is going on. But I just want it to be clear. I don't know. I think that's what's going on. I think that's what's actually happening. Ironically, I think what's actually happening is a lot of Patriot psyops. But I'm not saying, some days I wake up and I'm not okay with it entirely. But here's what I'll content myself with is, again, that Chris Paul mentality and the mentality that you've largely forwarded tonight. Whether or not they're engaging in psyops, it's our choice whether or not to accept that, right? Yep. And I think it's a good thing when people like you and people like Chris and me, I think going forward, push through that. It's like when I talk about the psyops, it's not because I'm trying to just say, this is all good. It's actually because I'm trying to tell people, I think you're being psyoped. And the choice to know you're being psyoped is yours. And if enough people know that, whether it's patriots or not, then we're not going to allow that in the future. They're not going to be necessary either.
Yes. Okay. So the last thing I want to say on this doesn't need a rebuttal, but I'm sure you'll give me one anyway. But then we can move on. So I'm okay. Like I've become accepting of psyops for sure. I wrote a whole article on them. Like my part 22 and 23 on irregular warfare. Like I will never take credit for being the one to first talk about psyops and all that stuff because I wasn't. But that's like when it went. Like that's when it became more common knowledge, right? Everybody started talking about psyops. The Ghost of the Machine video. That was probably what did it. I'm totally okay with psyops being used, but if we're just going to replace one group of people who's done nothing but lie to us with another group of people that's going to continue to do nothing but lie to us, even if they're, it's for a better reason, that's what I'm not okay with. So I'm okay with psyops if we get to a point where the psyops end.
Yep.
If they can take us to that point where the psyops end, I'm totally on board with the process that we take to get there. Maybe not 100% with everything, but I can accept the reasoning behind it. But they have to end at some point. Like we need to get to the truth as best we can eventually. And if we can't get there, then I'm not going to be okay with it. Like if we just move into this second administration and get beyond Trump and all these things and nothing's really changed in terms of psyops and the media figures and all these things, and we know there's lies and it's still bullshit, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow.
Totally. And I think with Doge and even comments made about the JFK files and Ezra Cohen Watnick and those promises, I think those promises will be kept, but they need to be kept. And we need to, it's not us dooming out on Patriot plans, etc., by calling those things out, because we need to. We need to keep doing that going forward.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. Brando Commando, nukes would have already popped off if something wasn't going on. Maybe not. Probably, though. Rambo and friends again. I have told anyone that will listen how awesome Gart was. Thanks, man. It was nice having you there. I hope you come to another one. Hope you come to every future one. And then Scooter2650. Badlands Media license plate cover mug and bottle opener will be on display tomorrow since I just got in recently. God bless all and happy Thanksgiving. Nice. Oh, yeah. We have wrapping paper, Badlands wrapping paper, and Christmas ornaments on our merch store now, which is pretty cool. So check that out. Damn. And we have the Christmas sweater on Rise of Tires merch store. So get your holiday gear, guys. But there we go. That's everything. And I don't have a good outro video. I could play the South Park one, but I don't think that would go over well. Let me see if I can find a good one.
You don't think the people are ready?
Well, I mean, if they watched, I consider the Liberty Den to be my place where I can play all the super inappropriate stuff.
Savages. Yeah, they know what they're getting. You shouldn't have come in here if you didn't know exactly what you were getting.
Exactly. Let's maybe we'll end with this clip. This is an oldie but a goodie in light of Trump's return. So thanks everybody. Hit the thumbs up. Have a happy Thanksgiving. And if you have any liberal relatives, make sure you very proudly speak good of Trump.
Are you? He's going to his grandparents' house for Thanksgiving, so he is overjoyed.
Oh, I'm sure he's excited. All right. Can we end it now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'm going to show you how to play a clip. Go under the video clips on the right.
I know how to play clips.
Under brand.
Yep.
Click on proper president. Third one down. Brand.
Oh, yeah.
Go down to video clips.
All right, here we go. This is how good I am at this.
America is a country that has tremendous potential. I think that much like the mind, I think that America is using very, very little of its potential. I feel that this country with the proper leadership can go on to become what it once was. And I hope, and certainly hope, that it does go on to be what it should be. It should really be a country that gets the respect of other countries.
Is respect the most important thing in your opinion?
Well, respect can lead to other things. When you get the respect of the other countries, then the other countries tend to do a little bit as you do, and you can create the right attitudes. I think it's a very mean life. I would love, and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it as somebody with strong views, and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process. The country, if we had the one man, and it's really not that big a situation. You know, people say, well, what could anybody do as president? The one man could turn this country around. The one proper president could turn this country around. I firmly believe that.